Good afternoon. How are you guys today? So, something occurred to me because there's a lot of angst with how things are unfolding and how, quote, slow, unquote, things are actually occurring in a lot of people's opinions. We really need to take a look at how things work. And maybe then you'll start to understand how big this particular effort really is. There are others that have actually alluded to this, but let's dig in deep and actually do a primer on what is the swamp and help you understand what that really means. So let's take a look. So this is a infographic that you can download from our website on the swamp, and we're going to actually dive in and go through each section one at a time. I don't know how long the video will be, but I know it's going to be thorough. So let's take a look. All right, so it's all connected to begin with. So let's start with the world we live in. So entertainment uses movies, pop music to set up that conscious thought and prime you for things that are coming. It generates emotions that lets the cabal use our mass consciousness to manifest their goals. There's a lot to be said for getting thoughts in place, and anybody that's taken Tony Robbins' Personal Power or any of the others knows the power of mantras and speaking things into existence. So when we have things that are entertainment that are constantly in our face that tell us certain things, we start to adopt those particular mannerisms, those cultures, etc. So I remember when I was growing up, Robin Williams was playing Mork. Everybody was saying Nanu Nanu or Shazbot. All of those things were going on. So it became a classic amongst people that were watching the current big thing. Predictive programming down here at the lower left is to ensure that when events come, we say, oh yeah, we knew about that. The reality is they are telling you ahead of the event what's going to happen. And then once they've gotten that impacted to you, they use trauma-based mind control to create desired personalities in the entertainers. There's some great footage of Lady Gaga who was heavily medicated, and it's no secret whatsoever that she has been an MK Ultra subject. So if you're looking for messaging, she was there. At the inauguration for Biden, she was there. Take a look at what they were messaging. They were messaging the Hunger Games and getting people prepared for shortages and fighting for your food. So let's take a look at the next area here. False flag terrorism. So if you know Vegas, if you know all those things, lone gunman mass shootings are typically set out for their agenda to help propagate gun control. Bombings are utilized to create fear and justify constant wars. They also use those to execute divide and conquer strategies amongst people within our country. Why is it we have people at each other's throats when we all know and want the same things? So the goal for them is to increase the police state legislation. Our environment, the next thing across here, air, fire, land, and water, they utilize, and if you're not familiar, go do a search. They use HARP, which is the weapon or weather manipulation system in Alaska. They use directed energy weapons, earthquakes, machines, or masers. That's a satellite laser to destabilize regions. So if you wonder why suddenly we have hurricanes, tornadoes, all across mass spectrums of our country, you need to start looking at our government, and this is absolutely true. The patents actually back this up, and they classify any patents that could threaten what they're doing. So keep that in mind. Sanctuary cities is another one. This is interesting. It's safety for illegals, for enforcers, for spies, and this garners votes for the Democratic National Committee. The problem with that is ultimately it becomes a harbor for crime. And then people then start to realize, this is something that we can utilize and use against people. So, safe harbor cities and sanctuary cities. Let's look at GMO crops. Now, GMO hasn't been around that long. I worked for Ferrymore Seed Company back in the late 70s, early 80s. We weren't doing hybridized or GMO crops. We were doing hybridized flowers and vegetables, etc., to get better crops, but we weren't manipulating the genes, so to speak. So the problem with GMO crops is it removes the nutrients, controls the seed supply, because if you've ever realized, one of the things they do when they plant GMO crops, they sue neighboring acreage if they show up with any of their stuff blowing over there and pollinating their crops. So if it turns out, you have our new hybrid corn, those farmers then quickly lose their land and their livelihood because they get sued. The other thing we look at is, what are they feeding us? Take a look at how quickly fast food and all the rest of it caught on. Fast food and the increased spiral of healthcare within America has been absolutely manipulated, and there's no reason why we should be this way if we were eating healthy. So, again, take a look at who's propagating this and why. Healthcare. So, the pharma industry's only been around just over 100, 150 years. And prior to that, we were utilizing natural remedies. People don't realize that it wasn't the Dark Ages. We have oils, we have herbs, we have roots, all these great things that the healthcare industry can't make money on. So as they then prevent that knowledge from going out, and they keep you sick so that they can make money off you. So keep that in mind. Healthcare, doctors are prescription mechanisms. There's a great book written by a pharmacist called Your Pharmacist is a Whore. And it's written by a pharmacist, and he talks about how they are encouraged to promote drugs, promote the use of drugs, and ultimately to get people hooked on those as long as they do live. So keep that in mind. So when it comes to how they keep people in line, prostitution is used to blackmail, extort, and compromise politicians, judges, government workers, business people, foreign embassy workers. Look up Operation Midnight Climax if you'd like some information on that. And ultimately, that is how they keep everybody in line. And if you're familiar with Epstein, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. So keep that in mind. The Federal Reserve. Now, this is near and dear to my heart, and I won't elaborate, but it's not federal, and it's not a reserve. The Fed was set up in 1913 by several banking families and a Republican senator as a private corporation. The Fed prints currency, and the taxpayers pay interest in order to use it. Here's the thing. If we were to destroy and remove the Fed immediately and just set our currency based on assets, gold, silver, etc., that the government currently owns, we would immediately eliminate inflation and a lot of the debt issues. That's why there's been this call for a long time by Rand Paul, Ron Paul, etc., to audit the Fed. We need to know what's going on and why. So keep that in mind. Ultimately, this provides access to senators, congresspersons, and key committee people. That what happens in the government, even though they set policy direction, let's look at how it gets there. So let's start, and let me drag that over. There we go. All right. So let's start with the operatives. those who manage the matrix. So let's go a little deeper, right? So the rogue intel factions that are currently involved here, and I'm not going to say them out loud because that'll get flagged by the algorithm. So you can read them here. It's several three-letter agencies and then the Joint Task Force. They create false flags. They create front companies. They create networks of foreign spies and enforcers. They also have handlers, and you note here the video, find it, and if I locate it, I will definitely post it, of Lady Gaga and her handler when she was completely medicated to keep her from speaking out. That is one of those big things that most entertainers don't realize when they get involved in this. These intel factions also control money laundering, the news narrative. If you've never heard of Operation Mockingbird, that was started in the late 50s, and it was originally targeted at our enemies over in the USSR, and they pivoted it towards us, and there is legislation signed by Obama where they made it okay for our news agencies to lie to us. So look that one up. It's out there. There are I can't read this, but I think it says rat lines, which are profit centers to fund dark projects. They suppress patents. Currently, there's over 5,000 patents that have been classified for national security. Think about that. The government shouldn't be inventing these things. Why are they classifying them? And then weather, earthquake, and fire manipulation. Again, we mentioned those a minute ago. Big tech is the one that uses algorithmic censorship to control social media. So if you look, these folks are actually the ones that are controlling it. And those of us that have been out on Twitter and Facebook that have gotten booted, banned, etc., we know this all too well. They use algorithms to censor, deny access, and demonetize posts. They provide convenient and free platforms, but that ultimately means they dominate the space and can control the message. So keep that in mind. When it comes to the food industry, big agri, big biotech, and big pharma are controlling our health, and that is significant. Great example, there's a couple of good channels. American Homestead is one where if you can get off grid completely, I mean, he doesn't have electricity. They control that via solar at the house, and then they use lamps, etc. at night. But they have solar to control their pumps and other things. Zach has done a great job getting off grid and completely disconnected from all that is controlling us. He controls his food. He grows his own, including meat, veg, everything else. And he knows who to trade with to get everything else he needs. So again, if you can get completely out of the system, they can't control you. So keep that in mind. Ultimately, this is a network of global control. It's a concentration of corporate ownership with interlocking boards and a small niche group managing the network run mostly by financial institutions. Again, go back to who owns and runs the Fed. There's a great book called The Creature from Jekyll Island that explains how this came about. And you're going to be shocked, but it's worth reading. So let's take a look at the designers and funders. Go a little deeper. So those who design and fund the matrix. So those folks, we've got rogue elements of a three-letter agency. They've got the black projects, the deep underground military bases, and of course MK Ultra. They are the major funders, and here are a few folks. We know for a fact that SA has been removed over the last year, so keep that in mind. But they also utilize Luciferian rituals and occult magic to worship the dark side through rituals including child and human sacrifice. We know this, and that's part of the onus of the whole movement that is commonly the 17th letter movement. So if you're not familiar with that, look it up. They are dismantling this even as we speak. The secret societies that keep them in power. So realize these are all part of our higher institutions. Skull and Bones, for example, uh, the Fellowship, aka the Family, the Jesuits, Opus Dei, Freemasons and Rosicrucians, Knights Templar, and they have their regular events at the Bohemian Grove, which Alex Jones has actually exposed more than once. So these are the societies in the shadows that control things. The thing to keep in mind, the unelected private policy and trend setting groups, of which many people, including Bill G and many others, are members of, is the Bilderberg Group, the Club of Rome, the Royal Institution of Internal Affairs, Tavistock Institute, and the Trilateral Commission. I've been studying these things for 20 years, and I'll tell you, I still haven't mastered everything, but I've got a good clue what's going on. There are secret space programs with technology that is far more advanced than the tech here we have on the surface of the Earth. But again, they're calling them space programs. You need to realize we're in a closed system, and it's going to become very clear very shortly what that really means. So who's really behind all these people? Let's take a look. So they ultimately, so the bloodline families, and there's a couple of great books on the 13 bloodlines. I will make sure we link those. So these are those who know the ancient occult magic behind the Matrix. If you want to read up on how that happened, there's the Lost Book of Enoch that has, you can actually buy copies of it now on Amazon, and we will link that book. It explains where this knowledge came from and why it was passed on. It is forbidden knowledge, and a lot of that is being utilized against us. The religion they use to execute this is Luciferianism. It includes occult magic rituals, worshiping the dark side through these rituals, including child and human sacrifice. Who's involved in this and why it's important? So, aristocracy and the royalty. Note, you saw some news over the last couple weeks about the Queen of England and her being ill. You also saw news about the Pope and him being ill. Put two and two together, folks. Now, the banking families, that includes the Rothschilds and others, they have dominated the global financial institutions, and history shows what exactly is going on. There is history recorded where the Rothschilds have pitted various countries against each other, and they sold and loaned money so they could buy weapons, arms, etc. They don't care who wins because both countries then end up indebted to them. So keep that in mind. The Rothschilds have been involved in manipulating things for hundreds of years, and these bloodlines have existed for thousands of years. So that in and of itself is the overview or the primer about the swamp. The thing that you're going to come across, and it's going to be exposed very shortly here, is how involved our country has been. Whether you realize it or not, our country has been right in the midst of this. When people reference CPS in Arizona, where I live, is actually one of the largest child traffickers in the United States. And I don't say that without foundation. The other thing to keep in mind is many other states utilize their same organization for taking children out of the system and then utilizing them for these people. So I know that's a lot to digest. Take your time, go through the infographic. The next part of this infographic we'll put up a little later this week, and you're not going to believe what's coming next. Shalom.